It was a quiet night at the hospital. Emergency lights cast a faint glow on the sterile walls, creating an atmosphere of stillness. Nurses and doctors working the night shift exchanged soft conversations as the occasional sound of footsteps echoed through the empty corridors. Tonight seemed uneventful, until the automatic doors at the main entrance slowly slid open. Everyone assumed it was a patient entering, but instead, a German shepherd appeared. Its coat was matted with dried mud, its deep eyes reflecting both exhaustion and resolve. This was Max, a retired canine who had once served with distinction in the police force. Max moved cautiously but purposefully, carrying something in his jaws. A small bundle, carefully wrapped in an old cloth. The nurses exchanged stunned glances. One of them hesitated, but eventually stepped forward, curiosity overcoming fear. As the bundle was gently unwrapped, it felt as though all the air had been sucked out of the room. Inside was a baby. Tiny, frail, and struggling to breathe. Its skin pale and its chest rising and falling irregularly. "Oh my God, it's a baby," a nurse gasped, her voice trembling with shock. Suddenly, the stillness of the night shattered as the emergency room burst into action. Nurses and doctors sprang into action, their hurried footsteps echoing through the halls. Equipment was quickly prepared as the medical team fought to stabilize the fragile infant, each second ticking away like an urgent countdown. No one in the emergency room could believe what they were seeing. A dog had walked into the hospital, carrying a baby that was on the brink of death. Max stood still, silent and calm, showing no signs of fear or distress. His eyes, however, were filled with a desperate plea for help. The nurses and doctors, though experienced with countless emergencies, had never encountered anything like this before. "Quick, check his breathing and heart rate," one of the doctors instructed, snapping everyone into action. Another nurse knelt beside the bundle, her hands trembling as she carefully unwrapped the cloth. The baby's skin was icy cold to the touch, his tiny body covered in dirt, and his breathing was faint and irregular. "This child is severely dehydrated and malnourished," the lead doctor said gravely. "We need an IV. Now, we have to stabilize his respiration immediately." The heart monitor emitted a slow, weak beeping sound, signaling just how critical the situation was. A nurse quickly connected the baby to an oxygen supply, carefully adjusting the flow. Everyone worked in silence, the tension thick in the air as they raced to save the baby's life. As the medical team focused on the infant, one of the nurses couldn't help but keep glancing at Max. The German shepherd remained by the entrance, unmoving, his gaze fixed on the child as though waiting for a miracle. He didn't bark or growl. He simply watched, his eyes carrying an intelligence and urgency that felt almost human. "This is so strange. How did he know to bring the baby here?" the nurse murmured under her breath, her expression a mix of awe and disbelief. No one had an answer. All they knew was that Max had acted as if this was the most important mission of his life. The doctors worked tirelessly. One nurse adjusted the baby's oxygen levels while another checked his body temperature. "Still weak, but his vitals are starting to stabilize," someone reported quietly. The tension in the room eased slightly as the baby's condition began to show slight improvement. However, they all knew it was only the beginning. The child remained in critical condition. Yet, thanks to Max, he now had a fighting chance. Max, though clearly exhausted, never took his eyes off the baby. The room fell into a brief, profound silence as the medical staff fully grasped the extraordinary event that had just unfolded. News of the bizarre incident spread quickly throughout the hospital. Within minutes, the police received a call requesting their support. Officer Daniels, the lead investigator, arrived at the scene with his team. As they entered the emergency room, nurses recounted the surreal story, their faces still filled with shock. "We have no idea where the dog came from," the head nurse explained, her voice trembling slightly. "He brought the baby in, placed him on the floor, and just stood there. That's all we know." Officer Daniels narrowed his eyes, taking in the sight of Max near the entrance. "A dog carried a baby to the hospital? That's hard to believe," he muttered. though his expression softened as he observed Max's calm yet watchful demeanor. "Has anyone tried scanning for a chip?" Daniels asked. A young officer stepped forward with a scanner and cautiously approached Max. However, as soon as he got too close, Max backed away. His posture tense but not aggressive. His eyes remained sharp and alert, as if warning them not to come any nearer. "This dog's been trained," the young officer remarked. "He might be a retired canine." Daniels nodded and took a step closer, his movements slow and unthreatening. "Easy there, buddy," he said softly. Max studied him for a moment before allowing the officer to clip a leash onto his collar. "Let's see where he came from," Daniels instructed, signaling for his team to follow. Max began to walk, his steps deliberate and steady, as though he knew exactly where he was going. The officers followed closely, the flashing lights from their patrol cars casting long shadows on the pavement. They moved through the city streets in silence, tension growing with each passing block. "Where's he taking us?" one officer murmured under his breath. Finally, Max stopped in front of an old, dilapidated house in a deserted part of town. The front door was ajar, as if someone had left in a hurry. Daniels frowned. "This is it?" he said quietly. The officers exchanged wary glances before cautiously approaching the entrance. The smell of mold, stale air, and rotting food hit them as they stepped inside. Max led them through a cluttered living room and toward a small door at the back of the house. "Stay sharp," Daniels ordered, his voice low and tense. When they opened the door, they found a small, dimly lit room. In one corner stood an old, dusty crib. Around it were scattered signs of recent occupancy. An empty dog food bowl, a tattered blanket, and a few children's items strewn across the floor. Max slowly approached the crib and sniffed the spot where the baby had once been. "The baby was here," an officer whispered, his face hardening as he took in the scene. Exhausted, Max finally collapsed beside the crib, his body going limp as though he was allowing himself to rest for the first time. His mission was complete. The officers continued their search through the abandoned house, their flashlight beams cutting through layers of dust in every corner. The wooden floor groaned under their boots with each cautious step. Everything inside the house spoke of long-term neglect. Chairs were overturned, cabinets stood empty, and the dining table was littered with crumpled papers. "It looks like whoever lived here left in a hurry," one officer remarked, flipping through the scattered documents on the table. Meanwhile, another officer explored the kitchen. The sink was full of dirty dishes, and a faint odor of rotting food lingered in the air. On the countertop, a crumpled envelope caught his attention. He picked it up, opened it, and found a handwritten letter inside. The writing was shaky, as if written under extreme stress. "There's a letter here," he announced, then began reading aloud. "I no longer have the strength to care for him. Everything around me is falling apart. All I have left is Max, and I know he'll do the right thing. I hope that one day someone will forgive me." His voice trailed off as the final words echoed in the stillness. The letter wasn't signed, but its message was painfully clear. The author had reached a point of utter desperation, entrusting their child to the only companion they had left, their loyal dog, Max. "Max has been watching over the baby this whole time," one officer murmured, glancing at the German shepherd lying beside the crib. Max remained motionless, though his ears twitched slightly, still alert to his surroundings. "We need to find the mother," Officer Daniels ordered firmly. "We have enough evidence to know that she's in serious trouble." The officers began canvassing the few neighbors who still lived in the area. After some time, they found an elderly man who remembered the previous occupant of the house. "I remember the young woman who lived here," the man said, leaning on his cane. "She was always with a large dog. That must be him, right?" He nodded toward Max. "I think she was going through a hard time. I saw her with a baby a few months back, but then she just disappeared." The story was becoming clearer. The woman had been overwhelmed by hardship, and in a moment of despair, she placed her trust in Max, the dog who had protected her family to the very end. Based on clues from the letter and the neighbor's account, the police widened their search. After several hours, they received a report about a young woman wandering in an exhausted state at a nearby park. When the team arrived, they found her sitting motionless on a bench, clutching herself tightly against the cold. Her eyes were vacant, her face gaunt, and her hair unkempt. Officer Daniels approached cautiously, maintaining a serious but non-threatening tone. He chose his words carefully. "We found a child who was brought to the hospital. A dog led us to an abandoned house nearby. Do you know anything about this? We need to ensure the child's safety." At the mention of the child, the woman's eyes widened in shock and hope. "Noah, is it my son? Is he alive?" she stammered, her voice trembling as tears streamed down her face. She brought her hands to her mouth, her body shaking with emotion. Daniels exchanged glances with his team, recognizing that they had found the right person. He nodded gently and reassured her. "We found him. Noah is currently receiving treatment at the hospital. He's stable, but still under observation." Rachel broke down in sobs. After days of despair, she finally heard a glimmer of hope. Medical personnel quickly placed her on a stretcher to assess her condition. As they headed back to the hospital, Rachel began to tell her story. "Noah's father abandoned us right after he was born," she said, her voice hoarse with pain. "I tried to hold on, but everything fell apart. We ran out of food, out of money. I couldn't keep going." Rachel paused, her eyes distant as she relived the dark memories. "Max, he was always there for us. He never left my side or Noah's. When I was too weak to go on, I told Max. I asked him to take Noah somewhere safe." Silence filled the ambulance as the officers and medical staff absorbed the gravity of her words. The idea of a dog guiding a child to the hospital seemed impossible, yet Max had done exactly that. When the ambulance arrived at the hospital, Rachel was escorted to the pediatric care unit. Her heart pounded as she approached the door. Despite his exhaustion, Max stood and walked beside her, his gaze steady and vigilant. Inside the room, Rachel saw her son lying on a small bed, surrounded by medical equipment. His breathing was steady, and his skin no longer looked deathly pale. Tears filled her eyes as she gently placed her hands on his tiny face. "Noah, my baby," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. Max stood silently at the doorway, watching over them with calm, observant eyes. Rachel turned to him, overwhelmed by gratitude. "Thank you, Max. You saved my son. You saved my family," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. The doctors and officers stood quietly, moved by the profound moment unfolding before them. Max was no ordinary dog. He was a protector, a silent hero who had fulfilled his mission with unwavering loyalty and love. Rachel was allowed to stay by Noah's side as doctors continued to monitor his condition. After several hours, Noah began to show clear signs of recovery. Though still weak, he started to respond faintly to his mother's familiar voice. Rachel gently held his tiny hand, her eyes filled with love and hope. Max lay near the doorway, his body still weary but his ears alert. The doctors and nurses who had witnessed the entire story couldn't hide their admiration for the loyal dog. One nurse smiled and gently patted Max's head, whispering, "You're a real hero. Thanks to you, this little boy is alive." Max wagged his tail slightly, as if he understood the heartfelt praise. Rachel looked at Max with deep gratitude. "You saved us, Max." "I'll never forget what you've done," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. After a few days of treatment, the doctors confirmed that Noah was out of critical condition and steadily improving. Thanks to the dedicated care of the medical staff, the boy was slowly regaining his strength. Meanwhile, social workers at the hospital stepped in to help Rachel secure temporary housing and access essential support. The day of Rachel's discharge arrived on a bright, sunny morning. She held Noah in her arms, her face showing both exhaustion and renewed hope. As she stepped through the hospital doors, sunlight bathed her son's face. Noah opened his eyes wide in curiosity, gazing at his mother before giving her a small, gentle smile, the first one she had seen in days. Max walked beside them, his posture steady but alert, as though he still had a duty to protect them. Rachel stopped, bent down to stroke Max's head, and whispered, "We made it, Max. Thanks to you, we have a chance to start over." News of their emotional story had spread throughout the local community. When Rachel arrived at her new home, strangers showed up with small gifts for Noah: clothes, food, and toys. Some even offered job opportunities to Rachel, eager to help her rebuild her life. The first few days in their new home were challenging, but with the support of kind neighbors and Max's unwavering loyalty, Rachel knew she no longer had to face everything alone. She watched as Noah crawled across the floor, his bright, lively eyes full of wonder. "We made it through, Max," she said softly, stroking the dog's head. Max looked at her with his calm, wise eyes, as if to say he understood. Max's story was not just one of miraculous survival. It was a testament to love and loyalty that transcended all boundaries. Rachel, Noah, and Max's emotional journey has ended with a hopeful new beginning. But this story teaches us something even deeper. The power of loyalty, love, and sacrifice can change a family's destiny forever. If you found this story inspiring, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your feelings in the comments below and tell us what you think about Max's incredible courage and the family's journey to survival and hope. Hit the like button if you want to help spread this uplifting message to more people. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss more inspiring stories like this one. We are thrilled to have you as part of our growing community of people who cherish meaningful stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.